inspired by kingdom principles that work for you.
Thank you for watching Forward, Upward, Onward Together as a part of RBNTV. I'm Carey, your host. As we plod through the coronavirus pandemic, and as we continue through the 21st century, Grand Bahama remains poised for further development and economic expansion. The Bahamas has also embarked on a new endeavor to digitize its services and records to make businesses, services, and processes more simple for Bahamians, residents, and investors. So we'll speak with the man leading the charge in Grand Bahama and the digitization of the Bahamas. We are delighted to speak with the Minister of State for Grand Bahama, Senator Kwasi Thompson.
Hi, Carey.
Senator Thompson, I'm great. And yourself?
Doing wonderful. Excellent down here in Grand Bahama.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. You recently spent a few days, I think it might have been as much long as 14 days in quarantine. What was that like? Tell us, what was that like for those who may have never experienced a quarantine like that before?
Well, you know, it gives you a whole lot of time to reflect. It gives you a lot of time to spend with your family. But given the fact that we are in a digital age, and given the fact that the government never stops, that you are able to access your internet and you're able to use your computer, and you know, work really never stops. So whether you are at the office or whether you are at home, work continues. And so I'm pleased to be out of quarantine. You know, these are the things that we now have to deal with as a result of COVID. It was not my first time in quarantine, but actually the second time being in quarantine. But as a precaution, thankfully, I tested not positive, tested negative. So we're still very pleased at that. We're still trying our best to adhere to all of the safety protocols that have been put in place. We continue to do so, but very pleased to be out. One of the big things that you miss is, you know, I like to run on the beach, and that was one of the things that I missed. But just did a lot of laps in the front of my yard. That's all.
Well, it's good. I'm glad that you were able to stay positive throughout it all. You know, you said that government never sleeps, and we see this through our health services, through the police, and that government is a 24-hour business, for lack of a better term. And you've been responsible in heading up the digitization, as I said, of our government processes as well. And so how do you see, and this is even more important in light of the coronavirus pandemic, how do you see government leveraging technology even more so throughout its services and in its processes? You were able to work from home, but are other civil servants able to do that as well? And what's the future looking like in that regard?
So that's a big, huge question, and so I will do my best to sort of segment it and to give you as much detail as I can. But you're absolutely right. COVID has really caused us to have to transform, and in some cases transform overnight. It has accelerated the digitization process that the government was undertaking in any event we were moving ahead with, but this really caused us to accelerate it. Innovation right now, all countries have had to innovate, and innovation is required not just to be competitive, but innovation really is required just to survive. And so we've had to do a number of quick initiatives. We've had to accelerate a number of initiatives to move the whole digitization process forward. So, for example, one of the first things that we had to do for COVID was to put in place a mechanism that we could work, we could talk, we could communicate at home. And do it in a secure way that the government would be able to continue to function. And so we put in place a Cisco WebEx for the Bahamas government, which was secured on the Bahamas government's platform. And we use that as a means of communicating and having internal meetings. So I probably have anywhere up to 4 to 5 Cisco WebEx meetings a day. In certain circumstances, the parliamentary team has Cisco WebEx meetings. The cabinet, in certain circumstances, also meet on WebEx meetings. All of the permanent secretaries have Cisco WebEx meetings together. And in fact, it really has caused work to be more effective and efficient. When we had meetings and we had to travel to meetings, which caused those meetings to be further apart, and it caused people to have to fly in or drive in just to have in-person meetings. We find now that persons can be connected to Cisco WebEx on their telephone. They can be connected any time of the evening, any time of the day. They can be connected and be ready to meet and be ready to communicate. And so that was one of the biggest, I think, initiatives that we had put forward with respect to to COVID. We also have been working with individual ministries in pushing ahead their online initiatives. One of the things that we were working on before COVID was digitizing the in-house processes of government departments. But we found that we had to accelerate our not the in-house, but we had to accelerate those portions to get the public to have access to those services. So we had to change our focus from just the internal to the external, and allowing the public to be able to have access to those services. So, for example, the passport office, when it came to renewal of your e-passport, is a huge initiative that was taken and has been a huge success. Persons had to stand up on lines to first apply, fill out paper forms, come in and pay cash, and then wait, weeks upon weeks in order for those things to be processed, for the passports to be processed. We now have an online system where persons can apply online. They can apply 24/7. It is a simple process. It has actually made it more efficient. And so the back office, we have cut down the number of steps that people have to go through in order to get their passports. And now we are being told that the wait time is on average about 7 days, that someone can apply, pay, and then be notified to come and pick up your passport. And there, therein lies, I think, the benefit is, you don't have to keep calling and keep checking and keep finding out. They send you a notification by way of email. You then know when to come in and pick it up. You know when it's ready, and then you're able to come and pick it up as well. It has made paying for it more efficient because you can pay for it in advance on your credit card without having to come in and pay cash. That's just one example of the way
That's a huge benefit.
we're moving forward. It is a huge benefit, but that's the way upon which I think the government is moving. And I think that's the way upon which the government has to move when it comes to these kind of services.
Absolutely. And that's the way of the world. And so I'm glad that we are embarking on this digitization journey. It's very important. It's been about 2 years, but there was a tech conference, a tech hub conference that was held in Grand Bahama to create this particular tech hub and attract more companies into Grand Bahama with respect to investment in technology. And so how have we had some success in this regard? What's left in order to really and truly transform Grand Bahama into being, the tech hub of the region?
Well, first of all, the tech hub vision, I think, was a vision that was really from the Prime Minister, and it was also articulated in the Free National Movement's manifesto, that Grand Bahama really had the bones of being a tech hub. It also had the infrastructure, it had the proximity. It really was, with the Hawkesbury Creek Agreement and some of the benefits that the Hawkesbury Creek Agreement brings, it really was an ideal place for you to sort of start this vision. It also is a vision that is not a short term vision, but it is really a long term vision. And it's one of those things that you really never stop working on. You will have to continue to push and continue until you see some of the additional benefits. Also, it really encompasses multiple different avenues to be able to achieve this. The first thing was to do the technology hub, and was to do the tech summit, sorry. And the tech summit really started off by being a very small venture that we thought we were going to just bring maybe about 100 or so um, persons who stakeholders, so that we could discuss this idea about being a tech hub. But when we started to plan, we found that the response was so great that it ended up being a huge, huge venture, and it got so much support and so much international support and so much support from those who are in the technology industry as well. We had major speakers for some of the major tech companies, from Google, HP, Dell, Cisco. We had a number of major speakers that came in, and they also saw the vision and bought into the vision as well. And then we got huge support from Grand Bahamians. We got huge support from the rest of the country. Many people came in from Nassau to support it as well. And so the Tech Summit really gave us the push that we needed to sort of start this vision. Out of that summit, we organized a group of experts and stakeholders who came together and formed the Tech Hub Steering Committee. They met, that was headed by Dr. Donovan Moxey as well as Christy Powell, who was the vice chair, and they put together some recommendations to the government on how we could move this Tech Hub vision forward. The government immediately started working on those recommendations. We've actually completed a number of those recommendations and still working on completing some as well. We've had some successes. So, for example, we've had some technology companies that would have come to Grand Bahama. Some have continued, some have not continued. We've had some Bahamian companies that would have started as a result of the tech summit as well, and we are pleased that actually they are still moving along. One of the companies that does business with the government also said that they got their start and got their inspiration from attending the tech summit, and so we've seen some very, very positive results as a result of that. But we've also done some things in terms of building human capacity, which is extremely important. The I'll tell you one of the conversations we had with one of the big major tech companies when we sat down with them and said, look, we want you to come and set up a company. We were very naive at that time, but nevertheless, sometimes you have to be bold and naive too. But when we sat down and said, look, we want you to come and set up here in the Bahamas, and one of their questions was, well, look, coming and moving to the Bahamas is not a problem. We like the Bahamas, but that's not what we move for. How many persons are trained in cybersecurity? How many persons do you have that have software development degrees and experience? How many persons are trained in ICT? And that really got us to think that while we had this vision, we still had a huge problem with respect to having sufficient human capacity to build the tech hub, because that's really what the companies want. They want to come to a place that they can choose from a pool of persons who are already trained. And so if you notice, a lot of the tech hubs that are out there, that might be in Silicon Valley, that might be in India, in some of the other South American countries, and so on. They build around universities, but they build around universities because that's where the talent is. That's where the pool of persons come from. And so they gave us that vision. And so we took that and we ran with it. And so today we have almost 300 young people in Nassau and in Grand Bahama who have been trained website development, trained in cybersecurity, software development, and there's another 100 that will be joining that program. That program is a joint program between ourselves and BTVI. And once persons complete the program, that will actually take, and these are high school students because we wanted to start.
That was my question. Is it these high school or is this in the tertiary level?
This would
What,
be in
what
high
level
school.
education are
This
these?
actually between the age of, between grades of ninth grade and 12th grade students. And it is a very unique program because at the time the students graduate, they would have completed a year in credits at a college or universities in an ICT degree. And they would come out with certifications from Cisco, CompTIA, Microsoft, so much so that they would be able to enter the job market trained already in ICT and software development, and would be able to get jobs as soon as they graduate. And so that was one of the big things that we wanted to put in place to be able to say to a tech company, look, we now have 2, 3, 400 people that have been trained and can now move right into the job market. So we had to be focused on that. We've just signed a MOU with Cisco, specifically geared towards training software developers. And so come January, we will have 100 software developers in training. That training is going to take probably about 4 to 5 months to be completed. And once they are trained, they will then be able to access Cisco's what they call their talent bridge, which allows them to actually work remotely from the Bahamas with companies all around the world that have Cisco, that are Cisco
And that's what I
partners.
was going to say. They're now developing the skills that are necessary to really compete on the job market throughout the entire world. So it's great that we were able to sort of see that opportunity, harness it, and being able to train so many young people, in a lot of these technological systems. The government has faced a lot of press coverage regarding the Grand Lucaya Hotel, and I know that this is something that you've spoken about recently and for quite a bit of time. The heads of agreement was signed in March of this year, I think, right before we locked down, before the pandemic.
Yep.
But you recently said that this deal will be finalized before the end of the year. Are you able to say what next is needed in order to really solidify this deal with Holistica, and what sort of benefits we'll be able to reap as a result of this particular sale?
Yeah, so this sale again, years in the making, finally got to a point after almost a year of negotiating, almost a year of finding the right partners. In March of this year, we were able to solidify the agreement for sale, and also the heads of agreement. One of the major challenges also was Hurricane Dorian, that came, and that caused a big delay again in moving the project forward. And then COVID-19 came, and that really put a huge stumbling block to moving the project forward. We were pleased that after Hurricane Dorian, the Royal Caribbean and ITM, who were the developers and the joint partners of Holistica, that they, after Dorian, said, yes, we are prepared to come in. We're still prepared to move, even though the hotel was damaged. We're still prepared to come in and move our hotel project and cruise development project forward. Um, However, COVID came. And as you know, COVID hit the cruise industry in very, very difficult. It made it extremely difficult for them. And so one of the challenges that they had is looking how they had to modify the project, and they have had to modify the project. So right now,
Okay.
we are looking at the modifications. We are assessing those modifications. We believe shortly we are going to be able to work out the details of those modifications. And hopefully, once those modifications are completed, then we can move forward with having the full transfer. We are hopeful. We are hopeful. There's still some work to do. There's still some hurdles to cross, but we are hopeful that by the end of the year, that we should be in a position to do a final turnover to them.
So we've spoken about it, and it's also received quite a bit of press attention. That's the assistance that's been provided to Grand Bahamian businesses and the public as a result of the challenges from Hurricane Dorian and the coronavirus pandemic. Can you speak to the assistance that small businesses and the public have received as a result of these two very destructive major events?
Huge. It is never enough, and it is still not going to touch everyone. But the assistance that the government has put forward with respect to Dorian and COVID has been huge. We've had, first of all, national insurance. National insurance since Dorian and COVID has actually paid out in excess of $20 million to Grand Bahamians alone during this time to help to support them and during the programs that they've had. We've also put in place a food assistance program, and that food assistance program has has actually given out in excess of 35,000 food vouchers for Grand Bahamians, and that has probably helped about 26,000 people that lived in Grand Bahama, bearing in mind that we have approximately 50,000 people in Grand Bahama. So we believe have been able to touch close to half of the people in Grand Bahama with respect to our food voucher program. That's not including the assistance that social services does on a regular basis with respect to rental assistance, as well as the food assistance that they give out as well. But the small business assistance has been significant. The Small Business Development Center has done a wonderful job of doing grants and also doing loans. And the last total numbers that we got was there was approximately $3.6 million that was paid out to Grand Bahamian businesses. I think it may have been more than 400 who have received some assistance through the Small Business Development Center. And so $3.6 million has been a huge number. I think it's been over $1 million on grants alone. And that's not money that has to be paid back, but just on grants alone, over $1 million. And that's on the top of after Hurricane Dorian was a special recovery zone concessions where a number of items were able to brought in and be bought VAT free, as well as construction items, appliances, all could be brought back into the country VAT free and duty free, as well as replacement of vehicles could be brought in VAT free and duty free as well. So there were significant concessions and assistance programs that the government has put in place and continue to press forward with those assistance programs for Grand Bahama alone.
Yeah, it's definitely been a monumental task, just not only to climb out of Hurricane Dorian, but also to continue on through the pandemic. And so I know a lot of businesses are grateful during these very difficult times.
We've seen the real benefits to these businesses. I mean, we've seen businesses who've been destroyed, and they've been built back as a result of the assistance programs that have been given. We've seen some businesses got huge expansions because of there's a big logistics and construction company, young Bahamians who started small, but as a result of some of the assistance that was granted, some receive anywhere in the range of 100,000, some receive almost $400,000 or $500,000 worth of funding in order to move their business forward. And then one of the programs in the Small Business Development Center was a recovery fund to help businesses physically rebuild. And so a number of businesses got funding just so that they could sort of rebuild their infrastructure, rebuild their stock. We and that also translated also to homes that were being rebuilt. And so we saw the small home repair program out of the disaster recovery, where they provided anywhere from 5,000 on the small end to 10,000 on the larger end to houses to help them in terms of their repairs and so on. So we've seen in excess of 2,500 houses that have received this benefit and have been able to use this benefit to rebuild. So as I said, it's been significant. The assistance that the government has been able to provide has been significant.
Senator, you also spoke about the disaster recovery, and I would like to speak about the airport. In a recent press statement, you mentioned that this time the airport will be built. This will have been the third time in 7 years that the airport would have been rebuilt. So how do we rebuild in a resilient fashion? We recently had a coastal engineer, Carlos Palacios, on RBNTV on our show on how we can rebuild resiliency. We didn't specifically speak about the Freeport Airport, but is there an endeavor to rebuild resiliency as we develop the airport?
Absolutely. And that is the $1 million question. How do we rebuild the airport in a resilient way? The airport presently is owned by the Harbor Company, which is jointly owned by the Hutchison Company and the Grand Bahama Port Authority. And they have rebuilt the airport several times, as I've said, since we've had a number of these hurricanes. And the Hutchison had indicated that they were not going to rebuild. Obviously, that is not a sustainable position. And the government then therefore stepped in and said, we will have to look at taking the airport on ourselves. And so we are presently in negotiations with them to complete that sale. But what has to happen is there has to be a comprehensive assessment done on the property, and we have to answer those questions. What do we rebuild? How do we rebuild? And where do we rebuild? The airport property is about 2,500 acres, and so there's a lot of property that's there. It has a world-class runway, a runway that's worth several $1 million well. And so the runway, but the runway is good, but the building itself and the terminal itself is very vulnerable. And so we will be conducting an overall assessment of the airport that will answer those very questions. However, in the meantime, Hutchison has constructed a temporary facility, and they are in the process of expanding that temporary facility where it will be able to house about 350 seats and passengers that they're going to be able to accommodate would be anywhere from 300 to 400 passengers per hour. Obviously, that's far more than we expect to have in the near term, but that's the capacity of that airport. It's going to have again a place where we can receive guests, where we can a customs and immigration. That is going to be nowhere near what you have in Nassau, but nevertheless, it's going to be able to accommodate those flights, international and domestic flights that are coming in. But we definitely have to take a step back and not just rebuild what we have. I don't think anybody would expect that after having to rebuild 3 times that you're going to go ahead and rebuild the same thing on the fourth.
Same thing in the same manner. No.
They tell us that's insanity to keep doing the same thing and expect a different result.
Right.
So we have to assess how we do it. And we think once we've gotten that assessment back, then we would know what it is that we have to do to rebuild the world-class airport.
Senator, I do want to speak personally. When the government assumed office in 2017, there was this wellspring of optimism in the general public. And I think that you would agree. Since then, the challenges have really been compounded by Hurricane Dorian, the coronavirus pandemic, and now an economic downturn, among other challenges that have been forced and unforced, to be quite frank. How do you stay motivated? How do you still stay in the game?
Well, I think you have to in order to achieve your goal and to achieve your vision. I mean, when I came into this, I'm a deeply spiritual person. Believe that we are here because God has provided us with an opportunity to be here and an opportunity to serve. And I believe that God has his hand on Grand Bahama. I believe God still has his hand on Grand Bahama. And so one of those things that continues to motivate you is that this is all a part of God's plan, and we have to continue to move and to execute his plan. But in addition to that, you have the needs and the of the people and where the people are at. And even though things do not work out always the way that you plan, that does not mean that the needs of the people should be neglected in any way. In fact, if anything, that should motivate you to work even harder to meet those needs. And the challenges that come in, I said yesterday, there's a the only difference between what people see as stumbling blocks and stepping stones is the way that you use it. And so with every challenge that comes in, Hurricane Dorian brought in huge challenges that were unforeseen, that nobody had ever gone through before. I mean, nobody had ever seen the kind of destruction that we saw. But one of the things that Hurricane Dorian has actually done is actually created a huge opportunity in the construction field in Grand Bahama. And to the point where you found it very difficult to find a contractor because contractors were so busy. And so, again, you find opportunities in these very, very difficult times. And you always have to sort of draw strength on the people. People in Grand Bahama are very resilient. And I say this honestly, that they motivate me every day because they have gone through, they have lived this. This isn't a fairy tale for them. This isn't a book or a movie for them. This is real life. And if they get up every morning and press on every day and rebuild 3 and 4 and 5 times, I mean, some of these businesses have had to rebuild their their stores several times in several years, and they continue to do it. They continue to be motivated, and they continue to build back better every time. And so if you keep your focus on the people, and you keep your focus on trying to help and meet their needs and meet their challenges, then that is what motivates you to get up and to continue to do your work every day.
You spoke about service, and you do have a history of public service. You've served in the House of Assembly as, deputy speaker. You've been a senator now as well. Do you have political ambitions? Do you intend to run in the next election?
Well, I'm one of those fellows who seek God's guidance first on any move that I make. I'm still seeking Him, and so once that determination is made, then the public will know. But at this time, that's not really the focus. I mean, at this time, you're really not focused on what's going to happen come next election or so on, because you're so.
But it sounds like you haven't ruled it out either.
Well, your focus really is on what you're doing now. Your focus is on trying to finish the job that you have, continue to focus on doing the job that you have, and which is a huge, huge responsibility. And so we continue to try and press forward with what you have. But I'll hear from the Lord and hear from the people, and then that will determine the way that I go.
Senator Kwasi Thompson, Minister of State for Grand Bahama, thank you very much for joining us on Forward, Upward, Onward Together. This was a very enlightening conversation, and I think many in our viewing audience would find so as well. And thank you, our viewing audience, for watching us on Forward, Upward, Onward Together. Don't forget to like, watch, subscribe to RBNTV. Thank you again, and we'll see you next week.
You're watching RBNTV. We are networking, promoting, we're scoring points for you, proclaiming, declaring, here to encourage you. No matter the problem, we will enlighten you. We hear you, please listen. There is a point of